My daughter was driving a relatively small car, and she happened to hit a deer, and she stopped and called me and said, "What do I do next?" And she had just gotten her license, so she was obviously a little bit traumatized. Most of my projects are kind of working with animals in a sense of from biology and applied biology. The deer vehicle collision project is a little bit different. What can we learn about them, and how many are happening in Minnesota? How can we reduce them?
My main interests are transportation data analysis. So the way I like to think of it is sort of using data to improve the way we manage and sort of understand transportation systems. The goal of the project is really to, understand where they're occurring, understand what factors lead to higher risks for DVCs, and then use that information to try to suggest countermeasures, treatments that are effective, and specifically suggest locations.
We did a pilot project that was primarily based here in Duluth. We drove specific roads bi-weekly, approximately, and found DVCs and recorded when, where, basic information.
They put Minnesota consistently as one of the top 5 or 6 states in terms of number of DVCs per capita. You end up seeing a lot of DVCs in sort of exurban and rural areas around rural communities, so where you have people who are driving, driving home, driving to work, but also interacting with that wildlife on the roadway.
A lot of time, a driver drives along, hits a deer, and then just keeps on going because they don't need to stop. Looking at reports from insurance companies, there's about 40,000 DVCs reported in Minnesota every year, so it's a statistical estimate. The Minnesota Department of Public Safety, they've got records of about 1,600 to 2,000 deer every year being hit. All of them probably come from police reports. Now the problem with that is that we're only getting about 10% of the DVCs. And so you've got 90% of DVCs that you don't know where they're occurring.
We gathered data from a whole bunch of different MnDOT, state, federal databases on roadway characteristics. Areas that had more deer generally also had a higher DVC risk. Somewhat surprising to me was things like how curvy the road is, turns per mile. I would have expected that to correlate with higher crash rates, but it turns out when a road has a lot of turns, they're slowing down. The other one was road width. I would have expected sort of wider roads, you have better visibility, you can see the deer better, but it turns out the wider roads had much higher DVC crash risk. That brings us sort of to the biggest factor, which was speed. The higher the speed of the vehicles on that road, the higher the chance that there was going to be a DVC.
Most DVCs occur in the fall, and that's the breeding season for deer, and so deer are just moving much more than they typically do. And then there's a minor peak in the spring when does give birth to fawns.
If you expect that there might be deer, even if you just hit the deer at a slightly lower speed, there's a much better chance that you'll avoid injury or serious damage to the vehicle.
Often deer are not traveling alone, so you'll have one deer cross, and then it could be a fawn or a yearling or another doe that this first one knows is coming along behind. So you always want to look after you see one deer cross a road and be prepared to slow down. Given the enormous cost of DVCs, if we reduce them by even 1 or 2%, we're saving a lot of financial costs and emotional costs associated with a DVC.